The monster in the mirror. Syr'Nai hated the mirrors. They lined the sterile walls of the medbay locker room, a human design choice she had never understood. Every time she passed one, she kept her secondary eyes down and her main pair half-lidded. But even when she refused to look, her reflection always found her, a tall, looming figure draped in heavy layers, the dull green sheen of her chitin peeking through. Her kind had never been made for beauty. The Chalxari were bred for war, organic weapons grown in vats during a long-forgotten conflict. Their creators had vanished centuries ago, leaving the Chalxari to define themselves amid a galaxy that still recoiled at the sight of them. Forearms, claws like surgical blades, mandibles that clicked when they tried to form gentle sounds. Syr'Nai knew the horror written into her shape. She wore it like armor she could never remove. She adjusted the outer cloak around her shoulders and exited the locker room, heading toward the medbay. Her footfalls made faint clicking sounds against the composite deck plating, echoing slightly in the near-empty corridor. It was second shift on the salvage vessel Dynamo's reach, and the crew was quiet, either sleeping or deep in diagnostics after the last haul. Syr'Nai preferred it that way. Silence didn't judge. It didn't flinch. As she stepped into the medbay, the lights adjusted automatically, casting a pale bluish glow across the stainless counters. The hum of equipment greeted her like an old friend. Her hands made sense. They healed, repaired, stitched. In medbay, her body had purpose. And yet, Syr'Nai. She turned, her inner claws twitching instinctively at the sudden voice. Standing in the doorway was someone new. Tall, bipedal, soft-skinned. No exoskeleton, no mandibles, just pale flesh, copper hair, and startling blue eyes. A human. I'm Elias Monroe, he said with an awkward smile, tapping the side of his ID band. Engineering. I just got assigned. Syr'Nai nodded slowly. She'd read the manifest this morning. The salvage crews rotated often, but humans were rare and unpredictable. Their emotional range unsettled even the most stable xenopsychologists. You are assigned to Maintenance Bay 3, she said, her voice a soft rasp beneath her translator. Med Bay is not in your purview. I know, he said, stepping in farther. Just looking around. First time on a multi-species crew. I figured I'd try not to get lost later. He said it like a joke. Syr'Nai didn't laugh. Elias glanced around at the bioscanners and neural monitors, then pointed to a surgical arm mounted to the ceiling. That looks like a Mark 9 Xenofix. You guys run triage protocols on board. Syr'Nai blinked. Yes, I maintain it myself. He gave a low whistle, clearly impressed. Heard only Chalxari can calibrate those. Your hands have better precision than robotic arms, right? Something inside her flinched. Her claws tightened involuntarily. They are efficient, she said. For now. He nodded, looking at her, not with fear or revulsion, but curiosity. Cool. Well, I won't hover. Just wanted to say hey. As he turned to leave, Syr'Nai caught her own reflection again in the polished surface of a scanner panel. She stayed at it. Tall, jagged, a silhouette meant for war. Then she looked at the door where Elias had exited. Strange. He hadn't recoiled. He hadn't even stared. That unsettled her more than disgust would have. Later, while sterilizing instruments, Syr'Nai received a ping on her terminal. A maintenance report filed incorrectly. She sighed. It was a simple data structure issue, easy to fix. Filed by Monroe, Elias, human. Of course. She corrected the file silently, her claws tapping at the screen with rhythmic ease. She could have let it slide to systems, but she didn't. Something about that human's unbothered demeanor gnawed at her. What was he after? She had learned to read intentions. Syr'Nai knew the way beings looked at her when they thought she wasn't paying attention. The quiet discomfort, the nervous shifting. She had grown numb to it over time. But Elias hadn't looked through her. He'd looked at her. She didn't know which was wise. The next day, he returned. She was running diagnostics on a med drone when she heard the voice again. Morning, Doc. Or do you prefer Medic Syr'Nai? She didn't look up. I prefer silence when operating. He held up his hands in mock surrender, a grin spreading across his face. Got it. Just passing through. She watched him from the corner of her eyes as he examined the tools neatly aligned on the counter. Don't worry, he added, I won't touch anything. I've got a healthy fear of pointy things. Syr'Nai tilted her head. Then you should fear me. He looked at her directly. I don't. That stopped her. Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable, for her, at least. Elias simply leaned against the wall, relaxed, as if he had no idea how unnatural it was for someone to look a Chalxari in the eye and not flinch. He meant it. He didn't fear her. For the first time in cycles, Syr'Nai didn't know what to say. When he left, she didn't return to her work immediately. Instead, she stood there, fingers hovering over her tools, her gaze drifting again to the mirrored surface nearby. She looked at herself, her clawed hands, her ridged, gleaming shell, the mandibles she kept tightly pressed, her forearms folded in unnatural symmetry. Was this body still a curse if someone didn't fear it? The new human. The humans always came with noise. Laughter, clapping, slang-riddled chatter that echoed down the steel corridors of the dynamo's reach. But Elias Monroe was quieter than most. He walked like he had nothing to prove, and that unsettled Syr'Nai more than all the loud ones. She had spent 3 cycles aboard this salvage ship, 3 cycles of silence. It suited her. She was tolerated because she was efficient, not because she was liked. The crew gave her a wide berth, like engineers do around malfunctioning reactors, necessary, but dangerous. And yet, here Elias was, sitting across from her in the mess hall, eating something suspiciously yellow out of a tray. Mind if I join you? He'd asked. Syr'Nai hadn't answered, but she hadn't stopped him either. Now he sat across from her, chewing with that rhythmic human jaw motion, occasionally glancing at her with those absurdly expressive blue eyes. She didn't eat in front of others. Her species digested externally, something the more delicate races found horrifying. She sipped a nutrient broth through a feeding tube discreetly tucked beneath her collar. Elias didn't seem to care. He just kept eating. This place has terrible coffee, he finally muttered, taking another sip. Tastes like hydraulic fluid with a side of self-loathing. She blinked slowly. Then why drink it? Because I like pretending it's not, he said, grinning. That grin again. Not mocking. Not forced. Just there. Unfazed. She studied him. Short reddish-brown hair, human stubble along his jaw, sleeves rolled up, revealing palms smudged with oil and the faint shimmer of old plasma burns. A workman's body. Worn, but capable. Are all humans like you? She asked, quietly. He swallowed, taken aback for a moment. Like me how? Unbothered. Elias gave a small shrug. We're not unbothered. We just bother differently. He took another bite, then pointed at her tray. You don't eat the solid rations. My physiology doesn't allow it. Right, he said, nodding. I read up a bit. Chalxari digestion. External enzyme breakdown. Correct. She hesitated. Most species find it repulsive. Elias shrugged again. Most species haven't seen my uncle's backyard barbecue. Same idea, fewer mandibles. A strange sound escaped Syr'Nai's throat. Not a laugh, exactly, but something near it. The first in months. He noticed. His eyes lit up, but he didn't comment on it. Didn't ruin it by pointing it out. Instead, he leaned back. You know, everyone warned me you were, well, cold. Accurate, she said flatly. I don't think so, he replied, tilting his head. You just seem careful. She stared at him. Most crewmates would have chosen the word hostile. Careful was new. He stood, balancing his empty tray. Anyway, I've got 2 fusion cores to patch before shift ends. Mind if I stop by medbay again later? I want to look at those surgical scanners you mentioned. I didn't mention them, she said. He grinned again. True, but you're thinking about it now. He left. Syr'Nai remained still for a long moment, broth forgotten. That evening, he returned, of course. Elias stepped into medbay carrying a toolkit and a datapad. Syr'Nai was calibrating the neural stim scanner, her lower arms adjusting the dials while her upper sets supported the hovering panel. You weren't joking, Elias said from the doorway. 4 arms makes that look easy. It is not, she replied. He approached slowly, deliberately. She appreciated that. Too many species moved quickly, erratically, as if forgetting they shared space with creatures that had claws and war-tuned reflexes. I read up on the Chalxari nervous system, he said, setting his pad down beside hers. Your brain processes parallel motor control pathways, like an organic quad-core processor. I am not a machine. Didn't say you were. He said it without hesitation, without apology. Syr'Nai looked at him sideways. She didn't know what to make of that. Elias gestured to the surgical scanner. Mind if I watch? Promise not to touch. She considered, then nodded once. He leaned against the counter, watching her work. You know, he said after a moment, I think it's kind of poetic. She paused. What is? Your hands. Built for war. Yeah? But you use them to heal. That's kind of beautiful. The word hit her like a misfired tranquilizer dart. She set the panel down more forcefully than necessary. You do not need to flatter me, human. I'm not, Elias said softly. I just say what I see. Syr'Nai turned to face him fully. Her mandibles twitched, unsure whether to hide or stand tall. And what do you see? He held her gaze without flinching. I see a medic who keeps this crew alive, who knows her work better than anyone on this ship. I see someone strong, not because of what she looks like, but because she's still here, doing the work, despite how people treat her. Syr'Nai felt something shift inside her, a strange ache, just beneath the plates of her chest. I'm not like you, she said. No, he agreed. You're better. She stared at him, unsure how to respond. Then the intercom buzzed. Engineering to Monroe. We need you in reactor maintenance. He tapped his comm on my way. As he gathered his tools, he glanced at her once more. Thanks for letting me hang out. You're easy to talk to. Another lie, surely, but it didn't feel like one. When he was gone, Syr'Nai stood in the med bay, surrounded by the gentle hum of machines and the familiar scent of antiseptic. She looked down at her hands. 4 arms, claws, hardened shell, unnatural symmetry. But maybe, just maybe, not a Cherished. Not to everyone. Cracks in the shell. The next time Elias came to medbay, Syr'Nai didn't flinch. She still didn't know why she allowed his visits. Only that when he arrived, always with a datapad or question, something inside her became less tense, less braced, like a field no longer waiting for fire. Today, he brought a damaged diagnostic tool. Bioscanner's glitching, he said, placing it carefully on the tray. I figured you'd know its language better than the engineers. Syr'Nai tilted her head, examining the charred sensor array. It's been exposed to plasma leakage. Recalibration won't help. Figured. You mind if I watch you rebuild it? She considered the request. He never pushed, never assumed. He asked, always, and somehow that mattered. You may observe. Do not interrupt. He gave a mock salute and pulled up a stool. Syr'Nai unfolded her tools in a practiced motion. Her secondary arms anchored the housing while the primary pair delicately extracted the internal chip. She moved with instinct, like breathing. Claws danced with a precision no machine could replicate. You ever think about how perfect that is? Elias asked quietly. I said no interruptions. Not interrupting. Admiring. She gave him a look, unreadable behind her bioluminescent eyes. What is it humans admire about claws? It's not the claws, he said, leaning forward. It's what they do when no one expects kindness from them. Syr'Nai didn't respond. Not right away. Her species was conditioned not to indulge in soft things like admiration. Praise led to pride. Pride led to failure. That was the Chalxari doctrine. But Elias had no doctrine. He just saw. I'm not here to be admired, she said quietly. I know, he replied. But that doesn't mean you don't deserve it. She set the scanner aside. The repairs would take a few hours, but her hand had started to tremble. Barely, but enough. You speak often of beauty, she said. Is it a fixation? Elias chuckled. You make it sound like a medical condition. She turned to him. Is it not? He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. Where I come from, beauty's not a measurement. It's a reaction, a feeling, something that grabs your chest and doesn't let go. Syr'Nai studied him, unsure whether to dismiss or absorb the sentiment. You see beauty in creatures like me, she asked. I see beauty in people who build, who care, who carry pain and still offer healing. His voice softened. That includes you. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, just full. Elias broke it gently. You ever take the cloak off? Must be heavy. Syr'Nai stiffened. The cloak wasn't just fabric. It was protection. It made her less visible, less herself. No, she said. The crew. They don't wish to see what's underneath. I'm not the crew. She looked at him. Really looked. Then, with a slow breath, she reached up and unlatched the collar. The cloak slid down, revealing her full frame. Bioluminescent patterns traced delicate lines across her carapace, subtle glows shifting with her breath. The shell was a tapestry of greens and iridescent black, like insect wings caught in moonlight. Her secondary arms flexed as if unsure they were allowed to be seen. Elias didn't speak, didn't gasp, didn't look away. He simply looked, gently, attentively, like he was seeing something sacred. That's incredible, he whispered. She felt her mandibles twitch. I am told it is monstrous. Then they are wrong, he said, without hesitation. Syr'Nai turned her gaze away. My form was designed for violence. Maybe, Elias said. But the way you move, it's not violent. It's art. She blinked. Her carapace pulsed faintly with a shimmer of blue. She hadn't meant to react like that. But the words struck something old and buried. You are different from the others, she murmured. I hope so, he replied. I don't want to be someone who only sees skin or shell. They were interrupted by the ship-wide alert. Collision protocol. Impact in 30 seconds. Brace for shockwave. Elias jumped to his feet. Syr'Nai caught herself against the table, claws locking into the metal. The impact struck moments later. The entire medbay lurched. Tools crashed to the floor. Lights flickered. Syr'Nai pushed off the wall. Emergency triage protocols activating. Come with me. They ran through the corridor. Crew members were scrambling, shouting. An asteroid fragment had hit the hull, just below engineering. Elias froze. That's where. Stay behind me, Syr'Nai ordered. She barreled through the smoke and heat, her exoskeleton shielding them from the sparks. They reached the engineering bay in seconds, only to find it half-collapsed. A beam had fallen. One crewman was pinned beneath it. Elias rushed forward. We need to lift this. You will damage your internal structure, Syr'Nai warned. I don't care. She shoved him aside gently and drove all four arms beneath the beam. Her claws bit into the alloy, sparks flying. With a guttural hiss, she lifted, just enough for Elias to drag the man clear. Then the beam collapsed again, sending a shockwave through her joints. She stumbled back, panting, her limbs trembling from the strain. Elias stared at her. Are you hurt? No, she rasped. But you will be if you don't assist with the plasma seals. They worked side by side until the pressure stabilized. Later, when the medbay was calm and the wounded crew were resting, Elias sat beside her. You lifted a 4-ton support beam with your bare claws, he said softly. I was designed for such things, she said. No, you chose to. He looked at her, really looked. Syr'Nai didn't wear the cloak now, and Elias didn't look away. Blood and bioluminescence. The medbay was chaos. 4 injured crew. 1 unconscious. 1 critical. Syr'Nai's hands moved faster than the room could track, 4 limbs dancing over scanners, injectors, tissue sealers. A lesser medic would have broken under the pressure. Syr'Nai thrived in it. But she was not calm. Not today. Elias hadn't reported in since the second impact. He had left to seal a ruptured plasma line after stabilizing the engineering bay. Syr'Nai had offered to go. He insisted. You've got better hands. I'll handle the patch job. That was 38 minutes ago. The comms were down. She sealed the last laceration on the lieutenant's abdomen, straightened, and turned to the med assistant drone. Maintain vitals. If levels drop, initiate neural stim protocol. Then she was gone, out the door, down the corridor. The smoke was thicker now. Emergency lights flickered in pulses of red. Syr'Nai moved like a predator, silent, fluid, focused. She reached the damaged junction near the lower maintenance deck. The door was half melted. The plasma flare had burned through part of the bulkhead. She forced it open, and there he was, slumped against the far wall, a gash running from his shoulder to his waist. His left leg bent at a wrong angle. His eyes half closed, barely conscious. "Elias," she said, rushing forward. He blinked, sluggishly. "Hey, Doc." The scent of blood, thick, metallic, alive, hit her senses. Human blood was fragile, too much outside the body, and the body stopped mattering. "You should not have come here," he whispered. "I am a medic," she snapped, kneeling beside him. "You are injured. I come where I am needed." He gave a weak smile, always so formal. Syr'Nai ignored it. She pressed a gauze patch to the wound, activating the sealant gel, then carefully scanned his vitals. The bleeding was bad. Internal damage worse. She'd have to carry him back. "I am going to lift you," she said. "Don't strain yourself." She looked at him sharply. "I lifted a support beam. You weigh less than a nutrient crate." He laughed and then winced in pain. With practiced ease, she wrapped her lower arms beneath his back and legs. Her upper arms stabilized his neck and shoulder. Carefully, cradling his broken form, she lifted. His blood soaked into the seam lines of a carapace. It didn't matter. Her claws had been made to end lives. Now they carried one. The medbay doors opened at her approach, and the staff inside froze. A Chalxari, uncloaked, bioluminescent patterns glowing like fire beneath black armor, carrying a blooded human in her arms like he weighed nothing. She strode through without speaking, laying him on the surgical bed with surgical precision. "Vitals stabilizing," the med assistant drone reported. "Sedate him," Syr'Nai ordered. "Prep for cranial scan and internal bleeding scan. Full diagnostics." "Yes, medic Syr'Nai." The crew cleared a path. No one spoke. No one dared. She worked with calm fury, claws sewing, cleaning, sealing. Her entire body moved in harmony. 4 arms, 6 digits each, working faster than most teams could coordinate. Even the drones couldn't keep up. The bleeding slowed. The scan confirmed spinal integrity. A collapsed lung reinflated under her treatment. Only once he was stable did she stop. Only then did she sit, beside the bed, blood drying in the crevices of her shell. She should have left, cleaned up, returned to her duties. But she didn't. She stayed. An hour later, Elias stirred. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Still here?" he croaked. "Yes." "You okay?" She stared at him. "You nearly died. You asked me if I am well." He gave a small grin. "Well, you're glowing again." She blinked. The glow lines along her arms and face shimmered softly. They always did when she was emotionally compromised. Bioluminescence betrayed what her voice could hide. "Biological response," she muttered. "Still beautiful." The word twisted something deep in her chest. "I was afraid you would die," she admitted. It came out quieter than she expected. "You saved me." "I used tools," she said. "Any medic could." "No," he interrupted. "Not like you." Syr'Nai looked down at her hands. Blood on claws. Dried now. Crimson against black. "I carried you," she murmured. "I felt your pulse through your skin. It was fading." "Yeah," he said. "But then I felt you holding me. And it stopped fading." They sat in silence again, surrounded by the low hum of machines and soft breathing. Syr'Nai rose, about to step away. But Elias reached out. His hand touched her arm, gently, just above the bioluminescent line that traced down her shoulder. His fingers brushed the carapace, and instead of recoiling, she froze. No one had ever touched her like that. Not with fear, not with obligation, but with care. "You're warm," he whispered. She nodded. "My species regulates internal heat." "No, I meant you are warm." Her breath caught. Elias didn't say more. He didn't need to. He let his hand drop, and his eyes closed again, finally at peace. Syr'Nai remained standing beside the bed, claws flexing slightly, her shell glowing soft and steady. For the first time in her life, the blood on her hands didn't feel like a curse. It felt like proof she had held someone together, and maybe, in doing so, held herself too. Learning to be seen. Syr'Nai no longer wore the cloak. Not in medbay. Not in the corridors. Not in front of Elias. There were still stays. There were always stays. A Chalxari without her concealment was like a blade drawn in a room full of diplomats. Unnerving, too sharp to ignore. But Elias never looked away. He was recovering well. 3 cracked ribs, a fractured leg, and blood loss would have killed most humans. Syr'Nai had pushed herself beyond protocol, bending rules and tissue to keep him breathing. Now, each day, he walked a little more, stayed awake a little longer. And every time she came into the room, his eyes lit up. No flinching, no discomfort, only light. That morning, she found him leaning against the medbay window, watching the stars crawl by. His cast had been replaced by a flexible support brace, and he stood on his own, stubbornly upright. "You should still be resting," she said as she entered. He smiled without turning. "The stars don't rest. Why should I?" "Because your internal organs are not shielded against reckless human stubbornness." "Fair." She stepped beside him, arms folded. For a moment, they stood in silence, gazing into the void. "Funny thing," he said. "From out there, no one looks monstrous. No edges. Just light." She said nothing, but her chest tightened. Elias glanced sideways. "You've been different lately." "In what way?" "You stand taller. You don't hide your glow." Syr'Nai tilted her head. "You say that like it's a triumph." "It is," he said, "and I'm glad." She stared at the stars a moment longer. "My people were built for battle. We were taught to conceal, to neutralize our presence. Standing tall meant inviting violence. And yet here you are." "Here I am," she echoed softly. Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal disc. Smooth, oval, marked with human characters. He placed it in her hand. She looked at it. A pendant. Basic ally. Nothing valuable. "What is this?" "A mirror," he said. "Well, sort of. Polished alloy. The kind we used as kids before we could afford actual glass. You said you don't like mirrors. I thought, maybe you just haven't had the right one." Syr'Nai stared at the object in her palm. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the cave. She saw herself, not as others had described her, not as the war form or the beast, but as something with form, texture, symmetry. A presence. She looked up. "You give strange gifts." "I think it suits you," he said. "And why would you care how I see myself?" Elias met her eyes. "Because how you see yourself changes how the world sees you." Syr'Nai held the pendant for a long moment before folding her claws around it. Carefully, like it was fragile, like she was. They walked the corridors together later that shift. Syr'Nai rarely did this. Her route was normally functional, medbay, maintenance, back again. No deviation, no exposure. But Elias had insisted. "Just a walk," he said. "You allowed to exist outside your station." So they walked. The ship wasn't kind. It never was. The corridors hissed with recycled air and the hum of machinery. Crew members passed them with narrowed eyes, some whispering, some openly staring. But Syr'Nai kept walking. Head high, shell bare, claws clicking gently on the floor. A pair of junior engineers turned a corner and stopped short. One of them, a thin humanoid with mottled skin, let out a low hiss. "Didn't know we let war bugs roam the hall now." Elias stepped forward before Syr'Nai could respond. His voice was calm, but firm. "Apologize." The engineer sneered. "I didn't realize pets needed defense." Elias didn't raise his voice. "That's Medic Syr'Nai. She pulled 3 people out of the fire while you were hiding in the supply lockers." A few crew had stopped to watch now. The second engineer, a younger woman, touched her companion's arm. "Come on, let's go." They left without another word. Syr'Nai watched them go. Not in anger, just observation, as if cataloging the moment. Elias turned to her. "Sorry, I should have let you handle that." "No," she said. "You were correct. You want to talk about it?" She considered. "No, but thank you." That night, in her quarters, Syr'Nai sat in front of the mirror Elias had given her. She studied her own reflection in the soft glow of her shell. The patterns on her arms pulsed gently, a ripple of green-blue waves, like sea light dancing through deep water. Her carapace caught the light in subtle hues, not black, as most assumed, but lead, green, violet, hints of gold. She turned her head slightly. There were ridges along her jaw, small but symmetrical. Her mandibles were smooth, not jagged. Her eyes, 4 in total, had depth and structure. Not a curse, she thought. Not entirely. She picked up a recording stylus and began to speak into it. Message log. Personal entry. Syr'Nai. A pause. Then, I encountered a human who does not flinch. He does not see my form as shameful. He speaks of beauty not as fact, but as feeling. I do not understand all of it, but I am trying. Another pause. I am learning what it means to be seen, and not feared. She set the stylus down. Her hand brushed the mirror again, and for once, she didn't look away. The next day, Elias brought her something new. A patch for her uniform. Not a rank, not an award. It bore her name, and beneath it, a single word. Healer. She stayed at it, then at him. I thought, maybe you'd want to wear something that reflects what you are, and not just what you were built to be. Syr'Nai turned the patch in her hands, claws brushing over the stitching. I do. She affixed it to her sleeve, and when they walked the halls that day, she wore it openly. Not just a medic, not just a Chalxari, a healer, and no one looked away. The mirror revisited. Syr'Nai's quarters were dimly lit, the soft hum of the ship's engines a constant lullaby in the background. Tonight, she felt inexplicably compelled to face what she had long avoided, the reflection of herself. The pendant Elias had given her lay on her bedside table, its polished surface catching a fragment of starlight through the viewport. It beckoned her to look, to see, and maybe to accept. Earlier in the day, during routine rounds, she had noticed her colleagues' furtive glances and whispered remarks. They saw the scars of past battles, the biological design meant for war. But today, as she wandered the silent corridors without her cloak, the weight of those stares pressed upon her. Standing alone in her room, away from scrutiny, she drew a deep breath and moved toward the mirror she had kept hidden behind a panel for far too long. For as long as she could remember, Syr'Nai avoided mirrors. Each reflective surface had reminded her of the creature the galaxy branded a curse, a being forged for conflict. Now, the mirror before her was an invitation. With hesitant precision, she detached it from its casing and set it on the small table opposite her bed. Its surface was clear, free of scratches, and held the promise of truth without distortion. Slowly, she slid into the seat, crossing her forearms as if to protect herself. At first, her eyes darted away from the mirror's surface, too used to averting the gaze of her own reflection. But then, as memories of Elias's gentle words and the unyielding look in his eyes came flooding back, she lifted her face and met her image head-on. In the mirror, she saw more than the familiar ridges, chitinous plates, and the sharp angles that had long defined her existence as a weapon of war. In that quiet moment, soft bioluminescent glows painted delicate lines across her carapace, revealing layers of color, greens and violets intermingled with hints of unexpected gold. Her eyes, usually distant and guarded, now shimmered with vulnerability, revealing a depth of feeling that had been locked away for millennia. A tremor ran through her mandibles as if recalling the long nights spent in solitude, convinced that her body was nothing more than a curse. But now, in the mirror, she saw fragments of beauty, a mosaic of scars and symmetries that told her story of survival and transformation. Slowly, she reached a claw toward her reflection and touched the cool, smooth surface. It was not an act of admiration, at least not at first, but one of acceptance, a tentative acknowledgement that this was her truth. Memories of the day's events surged back. Elias's quiet persistence, the way he had looked at her without fear or judgment, the way he had defended her honor when the crew's prejudices flared up in the corridors. His simple words, "You're a healer," had echoed in her mind like a benediction. It was as if, for once, Someone had seen not the war-made monster but the living soul beneath, capable of care and kindness. Her thoughts drifted to the moments in Med Bay. The emergency when she had hoisted a shattered human onto a surgical bed, saving his life with the very claws she now cradled lightly against the reflective glass. The blood that had stained her carapace during the rescue was no longer a mark of shame. In that light, it shone as a testament to her actions, to her determination to protect the fragile life of another, even if it meant enduring isolation and scorn from those too blinded by ancient prejudices. The silence in her room was profound yet comforting. It was a sanctuary where every whispered doubt could be met with the honest reflection of who she truly was. A part of her still trembled with the ingrained belief that she was an instrument of pain. But the mirror began to change that narrative. Instead of a monster, she started to see the indomitable spirit that had kept her going despite the odds. It was no longer a curse, but rather a testament to her resilience, her ability to forge beauty from the very elements designed to break her. She carefully activated a recorder, her voice soft and measured as she began a personal log. Message log, personal entry, Syr'Nai. Today, I looked in the mirror, not to see the curse I once believed I was, but to see me, a creature born of conflict, yes, but also a healer, a survivor, and perhaps something more. I see now that the scars upon my carapace speak of battles fought and won. They are not chains to hold me back, but medals earned in the name of persistence. The act of recording her thoughts was cathartic. Each word peeled away another layer of the self-imposed exile that had defined her existence. As she continued to speak, the room seemed to fill with a quiet light, a reflection of her inner transformation. The mirror, once a symbol of isolation, became a gateway to self-acceptance. Outside her door, the ship's corridors hummed with life, indifferent to the transformative epiphany happening in this single, secluded space. Yet, within the confines of her quarters, Syr'Nai felt connected to something larger, a silent promise that no matter the harsh judgments of others, she could reclaim her identity. When she finally turned off the recorder and sat back, a peaceful resolve settled over her. She had taken the first step in redefining herself. The bright colors of her bioluminescent patterns no longer shimmered in secret. They were hazed to display as a badge of honor. With the pendant Elias had given her resting gently against her chest and the newly cherished mirror keeping her truth in plain view, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. In that smile was the quiet acceptance of a being who had long struggled with self-loathing. The mirror had shown her that she was not solely the weapon she was made to be, but also a canvas of living art, an emblem of the strength and beauty found in embracing every part of oneself. Standing up slowly, she gently replaced the mirror in its casing, a personal relic to be revisited when the darkness of doubt returned. Today, however, the reflection in that mirror had rewritten her story. No longer would she hide behind cloaks or forced indifference. Instead, she would stand as she was, fully seen and, finally, fully accepting of herself. As she stepped out of her quarters, the corridors felt less oppressive. The stays of the crew, the whispers of past judgments, they no longer bore the weight of condemnation. With every step, Syr'Nai carried the quiet conviction that her body, with all its scars and beauty, was not a curse. It was her legacy, a symbol of healing, strength, and the unyielding power to redefine oneself. And somewhere, in the distance, she could almost hear Elias's voice whisper, "You are beautiful." Embraced. The Dynamo's reach was preparing for dock. After months on the edge of uncharted salvage zones, the crew was finally returning to station orbit. The hull was scarred from impacts, the engines still ran hot, and tempers were raw, but they had made it back. Syr'Nai stood on the observation deck, alone, watching the glowing rings of the orbital station come into view. It shimmered like a crown against the blackness of space, bustling with vessels, movement, and life. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. She didn't need to look to know it was Elias. "I still don't understand how you walk that quietly," he said, stepping up beside her. "You're nearly 2 meters tall and built like a tank." "I distribute my weight carefully," Syr'Nai replied. Some of us were engineered with discipline. He smiled. You say that like it's a flaw. It used to be. They watched the station grow closer. Elias's reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Taller now, healed, standing straighter. A scar curved faintly across his temple, just beneath his hairline, a permanent mark of the day he almost didn't make it. Have you decided? He asked quietly. Yes, Syr'Nai said. She had received a message that morning, an offer from the Unified Human Exploration and Science Council, a joint post on a new medical research vessel orbiting the Delcon expanse, a position that would place her at the heart of a major xenomedical effort, surrounded by humans and aliens alike. Elias had received a transfer offer, too. I accepted, she said simply. Elias didn't respond at first, but then a soft, knowing smile touched his lips. So did I. They stood in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. This would be a new ship, a new mission, a new life, one not shaped by what she had been made to be, but by what she had chosen to become. When they stepped off the ship and onto the station, Syr'Nai did not wear the cloak. The terminal buzzed with activity, technicians, diplomats, researchers from every corner of the galaxy. And in the middle of it all, a Chalxari walked openly through the crowd, shell gleaming, head held high. Some stared, some whispered, but no one stepped in her way. Elias walked beside her, hands in his jacket pockets, glancing sideways every so often. She noticed, though he said nothing. I am not going to disappear, she said. He smirked. Did I look that obvious? Yes. He laughed. They passed a corridor flanked with signs in multiple languages, transfer gates, directional routes, medical terminals. One panel listed the names of arriving personnel. Her name was among them. Syr'Nai, Chief Xenobiologist, Project Vessery. It no longer read security asset. No longer combat specialist. No longer Chalxari, clearance level red. Just Chief Xenobiologist. And beneath that title, Elias's name appeared too. Elias Monroe, Lead Field Engineer, Vessery Division. Two names, side by side. Something warm stirred in her chest. Later that evening, after settling into the temporary quarters, Elias brought 2 cups of what he claimed was real human tea. It's nothing fancy, he said, handing her one, but it's calming. She took it in both lower hands, sniffed it with curiosity. The scent was strange, sharp, earthy, and faintly sweet. She sipped it slowly, watching him as he sat on the edge of the small bench. You're still glowing, he said, eyes flicking to her arms. It's been difficult to stop, she admitted. The pathways are affected by elevated emotional states. He gave her a look. Elevated, oh. She inclined her head. You speak plainly. I am learning. A moment passed between them, charged but gentle. Then Elias reached out, slowly, as always, and touched the edge of her claw. Not grabbed, not tugged, just touched. She didn't pull away. Instead, she extended her other hand, placing it gently on top of his. Elias, she said, voice low, I once believed my body was a mistake, that everything about me existed only to remind others of Faye. He nodded silently. But you? Her mandibles flexed slightly, the Chalxari equivalent of an emotional hitch. You have looked at me as if every piece has meaning. That's because it does, he said. She turned her hand, threading her claw carefully through his fingers. His skin was warm, fragile, pink. She had once feared she might cut someone like this. But now, they simply fit. I thought I had to become invisible to survive, she said. But you saw me, and somehow, I survived more because of it. Elias leaned forward, eyes soft. I didn't save you, Syr'Nai. You did that yourself. A pause. But I'm honored to walk beside someone who never gave up on herself. Her bioluminescence pulsed gently in reply. Not bright, not loud, just steady. Before they turned in for the night, Syr'Nai stepped into the small washroom, facing the polished wall panel serving as a makeshift mirror. She looked at herself. The reflection stayed back without judgment. The patterns on her arms traced gently along the curves of her body. The ridges of her shoulders no longer looked like weapons. They looked like art, like armor made for something sacred. She brushed her fingers along the edge of her jaw, tilted her head, and smiled, not with her mouth, but with the glimmer in her 4 eyes. For the first time in her life, the mirror didn't feel like a trial. It felt like an arrival. Outside, Elias waited by the viewport, watching the stars. She stepped beside him, and without a word, he reached for her hand again. She let him take it. Together, they watched the galaxy move. Each light a story, each story a reminder that even among infinite stars, some truths were simple. You are not broken. You are not what they say you are. You are here. You are seen. And in that quiet, infinite moment, every inch of her was embraced.